After hearing that 2 of our neighbors' homes got burgled, there was an emphasis in the neighborhood to be more safety conscious. It turns out that the criminal had targeted homes during the day when our neighbors were at work. They got in through an open window on the 2nd floor, so I decided to close the shutters as well as the windows during the day. I thought that if we put stones, like gravel, in the garden, then we would hear people approaching. I put gravel at the entrance to the garden, alongside the hedge and in front of the back door which leads to the kitchen. The lock to that back door was really old, so we got a new one. I thought that I had done a good job in beefing up security, but later that night as I was trying to get to sleep, I heard the crunching of gravel coming from outside. I panicked at first, but I considered that it could be a neighborhood cat in our garden. I wanted to check it out though. I grabbed my flashlight and headed out into the garden. I looked around, but I couldn't find a cat or anything. This incident really freaked out my wife. She's the safety conscious one. We got a chained lock for the garden entrance door, which we left on regularly. We also got some thorny bushes and put them under the hedge and behind the garden door. A couple of weeks, maybe a month at tops, go by, and I heard from someone in the neighborhood that another residence had been burgled. It was an apartment this time, and the windows were smashed. The intruder broke in through the stairwell. It seems like the intruders were ramping up their efforts, maybe even growing more aggressive. Again, it made things pretty tense. Seeing a bunch of police cars in our quiet area was pretty strange, so once again my wife said, "We have to beef up security." I swear she wanted our house to be some kind of fortress. We put a sensor light in the garden. I set it up on the veranda on the 2nd floor, so when it came on it would cast its light all over the garden. I thought that would be the perfect deterrent. It was very sensitive and powerful. There was a parking lot just the other side of the hedge on one side of our garden, and sometimes the light would go on when someone opened and closed their car doors. I thought that this would be enough to keep our family safe and at ease. A couple of days go by and I didn't hear anything more about any break-ins in the area. My wife told me that the grass was getting a little long in the garden, so I went to mow it. I went out and I noticed something shocking. I found some footprints in the mud. They were adult-sized, and they were from a brand of sneaker that wasn't mine. There were 2 clear footprints in the soil. Those footprints weren't there last time I mowed the lawn, and that could have only been a month ago. I couldn't hide my shock. It was like all the security measures had been for nothing. I cannot help but think that the person who did this wanted me to know that they had access to our house. Nothing has happened so far, and it's been about a month, but I have a feeling that the owner of those footprints will be back. Call me paranoid, but I feel as if I've been hearing rocks being tossed against the window late at night. A couple of nights ago my car alarm went off as well. I really hope that it's just me being overly cautious, but I cannot dismiss the fact that someone could be watching and waiting.
One day I got a call from my boyfriend. His name is Akira. He was speaking in a frantic, desperate voice, and he had something to ask me.
Hey, I've been called away on some urgent business. I need you to house sit for me. Can you do that? It will only be for about 2 days, and you can go to your classes from my place. You've got to help me. If anyone turns up, and I don't think anyone will, but if someone does, just say you're my girlfriend, and that's why you're there. Just say I'm on some business and then get rid of them. Like I said, I don't think anyone will turn up though.
I didn't really understand the request, but I liked his place and it was a lot closer to college. I figured I could just veg out, watch movies all the time, so I happily accepted. The first evening I was there, things went smoothly. Watched a couple of DVDs and it got to around 8 p.m. Then my peaceful night was disrupted. I heard a thunderous banging sound coming from his front door. Some voice was shouting,
"Open up! I know you're in there. Come out now!"
Obviously, I was shocked and worried. I wondered if there was something I was doing that upset a neighbor or something. I was watching movies at such a low volume, I doubted that that could be the case. I couldn't really pretend that no one was home because in Akira's entryway, there was a small window and I had left the hallway light on, so it clearly looked like someone was home. Also, Akira's place was just a cheap college dorm. The door was old and I wasn't sure if it would stand up to much. It looked like a door you'd see at the back of a house, like a kitchen door or something. It had many dents and scratches in it. I was scared and alone, so I had little other choice than to reply. Akira's not here, I said.
Oh, you're putting on a woman's voice. Open up. I know it's you.
The voice behind the door shouted. I opened up the little window I'd mentioned earlier and said, Akira's not here, honestly. The second I finished stating those words, an arm burst through the window and a fist grabbed hold of my hair. The window was only about the size of an A4 piece of paper, but the guy who had a hold of me tried to pull himself through the window. Then suddenly the guy let go of me, and I'm not sure if it was deliberate or accidental. I was really scared and didn't know why this happened, so I called Akira. I was hiding in the locked bathroom, terrified, waiting for him to answer the phone. When he finally picked up, he acted like he couldn't believe that it happened.
Really? Oh, whoa, how random. You should get out of there right now. Why don't you come to campus? I'm in the club room.
Was he dumb? There was some psycho on the other side of the door, and he lived on the 3rd floor. It wasn't like I was about to walk past this guy without being noticed or jump out the window. I realized that I should have called the police and not him. I was crying and on the verge of a panic attack. I was out of options, but then I heard another voice from outside. I'm guessing it was another resident. He was shouting some pretty explicit threats, and then I heard him chase the intruder off. It was quiet outside now. I waited for a while, then I unlocked the bathroom door and walked towards his front door. I looked through the peephole and there was no one out there. I decided to make a break for it. I was still scared but wanted some answers. So I headed to university to find Akira. In our college, they had a room called the club room. It's a huge hangout spot. I went in there and Akira was with some women I didn't know watching TV and eating candy together. I shouted at him. What the hell do you think you're doing, putting me in that situation? Then he proceeded to tell me the following. This is my ex-girlfriend Yumi. She's been hiding out with me in the club room because she's being chased by her ex. He's abusive and stuff. Her ex suspected that me and Yumi were getting together. And we are so not though. Anyway, I suspected that he might come looking for me at my place, and it looks like he did. So that's why I asked you to house sit at my place, so that when he turned up, then he would believe that I have a girlfriend and there's nothing going on with his ex. I guess that he would go crazy if he saw me in person. It was something like that. Sorry, but it's hard for me to recall bullshit accurately. Clearly, he didn't seem to mind if the stalker of his ex was rough on me. Furthermore, I called him in a panic, worried for my life, and where was he? Sat comforting and watching TV with this Yumi. I was angry and I asked him outright, so what? Your ex is more important to you than I am? He said something like this in his response. No, it's not like that. I just wanted to comfort the person who was most in need. You know what? For you to say something like that to me, it's just disappointing and really cold. I really didn't expect that from you. His ex Yumi looked at him and grinned, and the prick grinned back at her. I stood there indignant of thinking of a response, but something deep down said, he's not worth it. The only response I gave him was, I'm done with you. We are breaking up. On the way home, I stopped by his place and left a note on his door. Akira and Yumi are in the club room at college. After that, I just went home. The next morning, I look at my phone and there is about 10 missed calls from Akira. About a month later, I heard from a mutual friend of Akira and I that he had gotten into a serious accident and was taking a break from college and was back in his hometown. And I was glad. I didn't hear anything about Yumi because I didn't know her in the first place. I'm thankful this is all behind me now.
My best friend at school and I used to go over to one another's home often. His family was always really welcoming and nice to me. I was encouraged to turn up whenever I felt like. On occasion I would turn up and my friend wouldn't be there, but his mum would be like, "Oh hey, come in, it's so great to see you. Why don't you hang out here for a bit? I have to do a little bit of shopping, so you can keep an eye on the place, snacks in the fridge." My friend's mum and my mum were very close, and we had a great relationship between our families. I would often stay home for her if no one was home. This experience takes place when I was asked by my mum to go over to my friend's house with some vegetables our grandmother grew in her garden. It was about lunchtime when I headed over. I pressed the bell for their home, but no one came to the door. I guessed that no one was in. That was fine because I was entrusted with the location of their spare key. They hid it in case of emergencies. On times like this when they were out, and I was sent to return something, I knew to just leave it in their living room, on the table, and lock up and return the key to where I found it. It was pretty routine. So I took the key out and I unlocked the door and I headed inside. As soon as I got inside, I sensed the presence of someone in the house with me. I instantly knew that someone was upstairs. I don't know, I guess I heard a noise or something. I thought, this is out of the ordinary. Someone should be down here. It was a Sunday after all. I guessed that my friend or his mum was upstairs, perhaps ill, and then I managed to somehow convince myself that one of them had collapsed or something. So I set the bag of vegetables down in the entryway and I headed upstairs. I thought that there could be a thief or intruder up there, so just in case, I did my best attempt of being one with the shadows. In my mind, I moved as silently as a ninja. I was a kid, lay off, I had a great imagination. Let me just explain the upstairs floor plan. If you go upstairs, from the back there is a storage room, my friend's room and the toilet, and then my mum's friend's room. If you were to crane your head from the top of the stairs, you'd pretty much see and hear anything that's going on up there. When I stealthily got to the top of the stairs, I didn't look because I heard something strange. It's like a kind of sound. Maybe it was an air leak. Like the sound of a tire being deflated, maybe? It was really weird. I heard the sound then travel across the hall towards my friend's room. I thought, oh man, there's something weird going on here. I don't think that's my friend or his mum making that noise. I just climbed the rest of the stairs and I headed towards my friend's room. I was careless or brave, but it happened. I craned my head around the door frame and I saw a man in his room. He was spitting everywhere. And that was the source of the sound. It was incredibly gross. I was completely lost for words. It was like I was dreaming. He spun around and looked my way. He didn't seem all that surprised by my presence. He gave me a cheerful greeting. "Ah, hello." I felt awkward enough to respond. Hi." That's all I could muster up. I was still very confused. A few seconds or so go crawling by, and then I ask, "What are you doing here?" "Just keeping my ex in her place, showing her who's boss. This is how you do it." I looked around my friend's room, and his toys, his dresser, his chest of drawers, and his clothes in his wardrobe were covered in this man's spit. I was stunned. There was someone who was completely out of their mind stood in my friend's bedroom. A thought jumped into my mind. Get the police. I ran downstairs and grabbed my grandma's vegetables, and I ran to the police station. 3 officers accompanied me back to my friend's house. They headed upstairs, but they said that they couldn't find anyone in the house. What I should have done, and I've had a lot of time to think about this, is lock the guy in the house. But, like I said, I was pretty young. My friend and his mum, who had been out, arrived back to their home to be greeted by the flashing lights of a police car and officers holding notebooks. By the time they had heard my story and heard from the officers, they were both in tears. And it turns out that the man I had seen in my friend's bedroom spitting on everything was my friend's dad. Apparently he had been searching for my friend's home after he got divorced with his wife. I have never met someone with that much malice. I never thought an adult would do that to their own flesh and blood. Well, I wonder. My friend's mum said to her boy, "We'll throw everything out he spat on." My friend reacted at first with anger. He had to be restrained by an understanding officer. I helped calm him down, and I'm not ashamed to say that I had tears in my eyes. My family gave some money to my friend's mum. His dad even spat on his underwear. Can you believe that? We wanted to help, not pity. The money we gave was given out of love, not obligation. Righteousness, not sympathy. There are decent people out there in the world, and I personally would never let that piece of shit's actions cloud my impression of those who do good out there. This is why this story is so hard to share. There is no lesson. There is nothing to be garnered except from disappointment in the man who committed those foul deeds in his empty ex-wife's house. My dad and my bro took turns in picking my friend's mum up and him from work and school and dropping them off. I was too young for a license. The police let their intentions be known too. And my friend's dad never came back.
I live with my wife, my daughter, and son in an apartment. We live out in the countryside in a suburban area. It's a really quiet place and rarely any crimes occur here. With it being so peaceful and pleasant out here, I often left the front door open to our apartment on hot days to allow the air to circulate throughout the apartment. This experience happened a few mornings ago when I was looking after my daughter and son while my wife went out to run some errands. "I'm thirsty," my son, he's 5, as he rushed into the kitchen. If I'm in the living room, I can see the fridge, so I kept an eye on him. Something was different that day, though. My son was looking at something. After he got a drink, he dropped it in the hall, and he was looking in the direction of our front door. I looked at him and asked him what he was doing. He didn't reply. He just stood there staring at the front door. I saw a look of concern pass across his face. He was stood completely still. I did not like this, so I got up and headed towards him and looked in the direction he was staring in. There was a man in our hallway that I'd never seen before. He looked to be in his 20s, dressed for summer, but there was something off about him. He definitely gave off a strange vibe. It's hard to put into words. I mean, of course he gave off a weird vibe. He was stood in my house, but there was something else up with him. He appeared to be out of breath. He was just looking around our place with these quick little side glances. For a moment, I was literally unable to move, still as a statue. Then I snapped out of it. I had children to protect. And when that thought came into the forefront of my mind, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. It was flight or fight time. I raced over and grabbed my boy, then shouted at the intruder. "The hell are you doing here?" He replied, "I'm just tired. I'm basically outside. Just give me a second here." "No. What the hell are you doing here? Answer me." He just stood there smiling, still not saying a word. To me, it looked like he was considering his options or scheming. I guess that my daughter had heard what was going on as I saw her head peeking out of the living room doorway. No matter what I said to this guy, he gave me nothing but nonsensical answers. He was utterly incomprehensible, and that troubled me. Was he buying time? We stood there in silence. 2 men, 2 strangers facing one another, both of us seeming unable to understand one another. My mind was racing. I clearly had to consider other options, so I just thought to myself, do I get a knife from the kitchen? Do I have to hit that guy? Obviously, I don't want to do anything like that in front of my kids. Why didn't this guy just leave? If he wanted something, why not ask? All these questions racing around in my head. He stood there with his eyes darting about my home, and then would come back to mine. While I was considering my options, the young man dashed out of my house, and then I heard a voice shout,
"Hey you! Wait!"
at the man. A uniformed policeman was rushing towards my place. I was really confused but also relieved. Glad that he finally left, but how did the policeman know where to come? My daughter came up to me from the lounge and told me that she called the cops. She's a smart kid, and I made a report with them. Afterwards, I heard from the officer that the young man had been going around that day exposing himself to residents. I found that disturbing. The reason the police were able to respond so quickly to my daughter's call was because they were already en route. They were in the area. A neighbor had placed a call, complaining about a man in the area running around being gross. Like I said. The officer said that the intruder must have felt like he had been backed into a corner, and that's why we had had that weird standoff in my home. The officer then said something that stayed with me. We are fairly certain that he was doing this. He was out of his mind. And with that, he gestured to a syringe in his forearm. I don't know. I guess I had a tear in my eye when he said that. He was so young. Even though he terrorized my family in those brief moments, and we stood eye to eye with one another, and all that stuff he had done, I just thought, what a waste. Anyway, don't leave your door open in the summer. You never know who might turn up. I'm just glad that I didn't decide to run those errands that morning. I cannot imagine what might have happened if he found my wife and kids home alone. I might be telling a different story.
This is an ongoing issue for me. Since I was a child, I have heard a tapping sound. It comes from the attic, behind closed doors, and sometimes I can even hear the odd creak of something, or something being dropped, hit, or pushed over. I guess you could say it's more like a rapping sound, right? Because a rap is a noise designed to gain someone's attention. And I guess that's what this is all about. Let me give you an example. I would often come home from school and I would be the only person in the house until my parents came home. They were both working. This rapping sound would come, even during those periods while I was alone. It would come from upstairs. It used to constantly worry and frighten me. I didn't know the cause. Another time I heard the sound of my front door opening. I would fearfully go and check, but it would always be shut. I often wondered if someone had just opened and then closed it. Because we live in Japan, there are a hell of a lot of sliding doors in homes. So on occasion I would hear these doors slide open too. Each time I heard one of these noises, I always believed that there was an intruder in our home, and I would either go to the kitchen and grab a knife or grab my dad's baseball bat before going to investigate the location the noise came from. Even though it happened so regularly, I had to make sure no one was there. These experiences weighed heavily on my mind from a young age, and if I'm completely honest with you, I guess it does no good to lie if I expect you to believe my experience. I should tell you that I grew into a safety-conscious and slightly paranoid adult because of all this. I, probably like you, have read too many creepy stories, read too many true crime stories, and cast the eye of suspicion over too many individuals. I was especially concerned with break-in and intruder stories. They really creeped me out. Stories of people coming in through windows and unlocked doors. Ugh, they're the worst, right? Are your doors locked? This fear of intruders even penetrated my dreams. Perhaps nightmare is the more accurate word. I have regular nightmares. The contents of these nightmares go like this. I'm constantly thinking that someone has gotten into my home. Sometimes I'm literally saying, I think someone's in my home. It's like a sense of intuition or premonition. So naturally, I rush to the place where I think the intruder's coming in. Let's say it's a window, for example. I look out there, and there is a middle-aged man, a guy who I have never seen before. He's out there and he's just staring at me, completely motionlessly. It's never one intruder though. There are always more. And as soon as I drive one away with a weapon, another appears at another access point. Like, I'll lock a door and then someone will appear at a window. Or the other way around. It's not always an old man. Sometimes it's a crazed woman who laughs, and sometimes it's a 10-foot tall humanoid thing. That thing is like a monster. As I have gotten older, the nightmares have changed or evolved. The intruders get in the house, and it's almost too much to bear. I always wake up when it becomes overwhelming. By the time I got into university, sleep paralysis had found me. I had never had it before. It was hellish. The thought at the forefront of my mind during this period was, there is someone in my home. The evolution in horror was continuous. During one of these nightmares, I heard the door of my dorm being opened. The realism and sense that I was no longer in my subconscious was unbearable. It was like the door really opened. I was almost certain of it. There was a distinct sound of footsteps approaching my door and opening it, and those footsteps approached the side of my bed and stopped there. I was shaking with chills in my bed during this nightmare. The footsteps seemed to loiter next to my bed. It was terrifying. I kept my eyes as tightly shut as I could. I tried to bear the horror of that nightmare, as I was aware I was not fully conscious, but the footsteps sounded so real. When I opened my eyes, I saw an old man with an expressionless face stood next to my bed. He was just staring at me. My brain went completely blank. It was a fog of fear. One thought came to the forefront again, and it screamed, "Someone's in my home!" And with that, I was released from the binds of sleep paralysis. I literally leapt out of my bed and spun around to hear a noise at my front door. Because I was in a university dorm, we had these heavy doors that would automatically close. I don't know, I guess it's to prevent fires or something. However, when I awoke from my nightmare, the door was somehow open a few centimeters. Feeling impending danger, I wanted to race over to the door and grab the doorknob, but I was frozen with fear. The hair on my body stood on end. I saw a small woman with a disturbing smile through the gap in the door. She was clutching the doorknob. She wasn't trying to get in, she was just staring at me. I screamed and forced myself to move towards the door. I grabbed the handle and pulled it with all my might, and I was a pretty big dude, way bigger than that creepy woman, but try as I might, I was unable to pull the door shut. She was smiling. She was holding the door open with just one hand. She was so skinny and small, I didn't know how this was possible. I was pulling with all my might and it wasn't budging. About 10 seconds had passed and she was still smiling at me. I was about to cry. It was like the horrors from my childhood were finally coming true. I thought to myself, I can't do it. It's over. The intruders are going to get in. Then in the next moment, I woke up. I was in bed. Remembering what had just happened, the old man walking in and the skinny woman, I jumped out of bed wondering if the door was going to open. I was in such a panic. I was so terrified I went over to the door to make sure it was shut, and thankfully it was. It was shut and locked just how I left it. It took me so long to get over that nightmare. It was by far the most realistic one I have ever had. The way I was paralyzed was just too much. That happened February of this year. What really worries me is the fact that I haven't had a nightmare like that since. The rapping sound, the knocks, the creaks, etc., they still remain. I've gotten used to those noises though. I wonder if there's some reason why I haven't had the nightmares. Maybe something has happened to stop them. I hope that's the case, but I can't confirm. Or maybe the next nightmare is going to be the one where it all comes true. Note, there have been no further posts by this user. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching, and thanks to my guest, the one and only Mr. Booze. And Booze, this one's for you, buddy. What an awesome job, thank you very much. Be sure to check out his channel, and you will find, coming up very soon, I believe next month, a personal story from myself over on his channel, so do get over there and subscribe. You won't want to miss that, maybe, I don't know, you might want to miss it. So definitely go over there and check him out and watch a video too and let him know who sent you. Have you ever had a home intruder story? I came home from school once and our front door was wide open. It was really, really frightening. I stood out there for ages thinking, do I go in? Do I go out? It's before mobile phones, so I didn't even call anybody. The neighbors were out. It was really weird. In the end, I did go in, went to the kitchen and got a knife. But what I think happened was someone just didn't shut the door and it blew open. No one was home though, it was pretty creepy. But anyway, if you have any interesting intruder stories or experiences, do share them. Thanks for liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing, all that great stuff. I'll see you soon.